Is it really possible somehow to be present and work fast and nevertheless be conscious at the same time? Interesting. Yes, it seems at first that when you are in presence, it almost seems to people that they are forced to do things slowly. And sometimes I'm described as slow. By some people close to me. And it's true. But sometimes I can be fast too. There are occasions when it is demanded, I can be fast. Its presence does not have to be slow. Remember the famous Zen saying, hurry slowly. Hurry slowly. Translated into Spanish, date prisa lentamente. I think that's a good translation. So, what does that mean? How can you go fast and yet be present at the same time? It has a lot to do with the focus of your attention. So you're working here. If a large part of your attention is where you want to get to, the result you want to achieve, then you are working here. If you said, one can't really put it in numbers or percentages, but I'll do it anyway. So if 80% of your attention is where you need to be, I need to get this finished, and in the meantime to do this, it creates a tension in you. There's a mental projection where you need to go, and in the meantime you're doing this in order to get there. If you can be more present and have 80% of your attention, reverse it, have 80% of your attention in the doing itself, and 20% on where you want to get to, because you have to get somewhere, then you can work fast, and working fast with presence implies enjoyment of the activity. And not being present usually implies lack of enjoyment of the activity and the arising of stress, or to be working with distaste or some kind of resistance. And that's not good for anybody. It's not good for you, for your physical body, the people around you. So you can practice with practical things, or even pretend that you're in a hurry. If you want to have just a trial practice, pretend that you're in a hurry and you need to get these things, or maybe you don't even need to pretend, because it happens often enough in real life that you're in a hurry, you need to get ready in order to leave the house or go out. And is it possible to do what you have to do within that space of a few minutes or whatever time you need to get ready, and do it actually being fully conscious of every movement and enjoy the energy behind it, which is really getting in touch with your conscious attention. Enjoy the energy that's behind the doing, rather than mentally projecting to the future. Do it, and that's hurry slowly is the meaning, is what that means. Running the same. If you have to run to catch a plane or a train or a bus or whatever, you can run and be totally centered and yet run fast. So it's a different kind of running. It's a more smooth, less stressful running. You'll actually enjoy every step of it, because you're not excessively focused on the next moment. And of course realizing, as the Zen master says, Zen is doing one thing at a time. That's another way of pointing to this way of acting and working. Zen is doing one thing at a time, which means giving your fullest attention to whatever you're doing at this moment. Then you know peripherally, of course, why you're doing it and where you want to go to. But in the meantime, you do it. And then you're running. And it's not a stressful running anymore. You actually, and if you miss the plane, what does it matter? It's just you're standing somewhere else and you're sitting somewhere else, not on the plane. Does it? And you're breathing somewhere. I need to be on that plane. Maybe not. So it's a practice of hurrying slowly. There's also a tendency in our civilization to create more deadlines than are actually necessary for good functioning of things. I find there are often people create for themselves, organizations and so on, create unnecessarily tight deadlines that often do not allow things to mature. And so that's this has to be done by tomorrow night. That's right. Why? And often they don't even publishers do that. Sometimes they bring out books. Some books have a slow time they gradually acquire their readers by word of mouth and so on. Many publishers say if not enough books are sold in the first 6 months, it's never printed again. There's not even given a chance. There are some TV series that may actually be quite good, and they have one run and say, not quite enough viewers, but it was so good. It was to just allow things to mature a little bit. Why the constant deadlines? But you may be trapped in an organization that does that, which more likely than not, because that's how this world functions. So it's ultimately you may have to create your own organization, or if the organization is flexible enough, you may be able to create a different environment. I'm famous for not meeting deadlines. And the world hasn't collapsed for some reason. But if I were an employee, I would have lost my job many times, or probably would have walked out, unless I could have introduced a different way of doing things. If there's room for that, that's good. Einstein said, I want to know the mind of God. The rest is details. Somebody asked what that means here. And of course, the mind of God is consciousness. Consciousness is the light that emanates from the... Consciousness is not God in the same way that the light of the sun is not the sun. And yet, on the other hand, the light of the sun is one with the sun. But you couldn't quite say this light, this is the sun. In the same way, your consciousness, which is not yours, the essence of who you are, the light of the world, is an emanation from the source of all life. And so I use the analogy of the sun. And there's a good reason why in many ancient civilizations the sun was regarded as God. because it's a continuous outpouring of life energy. And so in the sense-perceived universe, the closest analogy one can find is you can point to the sun and say that is like continuous emanation. All life derives from it. And the life, the consciousness in things is that. So God realization is the realization of I am that I am, your I am identity. And that's God speaking, but it would also be you speaking. So it doesn't transform the ray of the sun into the sun, but it makes the ray of the sunlight aware of its origin and its home and what it is still connected with and always remains connected with. At some point we need to transcend the naive beliefs in what God is as a controlling figure that created the world a long time ago, and then he walked away and lost interest, or maybe he's still interested but somehow things are not going well, or he's condemning people for being dysfunctional. And then, of course, there are many arguments you could raise against that kind of view of God, and that's the traditional argument of people who don't believe in God, believe in God, who say, if there were a God who controls everything and supposedly loves people, or maybe not doesn't love, but he's controlling things, then if there is a God, how would he allow all that suffering and evil to happen in this world? Therefore, they say, there is no God. Or they say, therefore, God is morally inferior to us, because we can see the injustices and the terrible things that happen in this world, and we are touched by it, but God isn't. Therefore, God is some inferior creature that created the world out of malevolent intent. That was actually a belief held by many of the Gnostics, ancient Christian and pre-Christian group of people who otherwise had also some interesting teachings, but they believed that the entire physical universe was the creation of a malevolent deity, an inferior deity. I can see why, in some way, but it's not the case. So there isn't a controlling figure there that is. So we need to go beyond that image, that anthropomorphic image of a paternal authority figure, and realize that God is the life in all beings. God manifests as the life in all beings. God is the consciousness in you, is the emanation of God. God lives through you. Everything that happens in humans, God is suffering in humans in a way, you could say. That's what the Christian teaching means. So it is a gradual emergence of consciousness, and the suffering is more like a dreamlike thing to God. It's like a bad dream, as in the process of emergence of that God consciousness into this dimension. So human beings are not autonomous entities. It's not you, your consciousness, his consciousness, her consciousness. Every human is a temporary expression of the one consciousness.